Maintenance climbed up a ladder and crawled into the ceiling above Mrs. Gomez's kitchen. There was a momentary silence that felt like those dramatic pauses in TV shows before someone drops a revelation. Then the guy emerged, shaking his head. Not from the upstairs unit, he said. It looks like the sink trap under Mrs. Gomez's sink is full of gunk and backed up. It leaked into the cabinet and then into the floor. I felt the tension melt out of me like steam. Marissa's face, however, began to switch from anger to something else. Annoyance, embarrassment, then denial. That can't be right, she snapped. Everything points to them. By I them, she meant me and my imagined waterworks. She accused me loudly right there in the hallway, in front of everyone. Oh, you always run things late. You had guests last night. Maybe someone washed the balcony. Who knows what you did? People murmured. A few nodded. Mrs. Gomez looked mortified, clutching her damp towels. I tried to explain calmly that maintenance had just confirmed the issue was under Mrs. Gomez's sink, but Marissa wasn't having it. I don't trust maintenance. I want a real investigation. I'm calling the cops. She marched off to a corner and dialed 911, like this disaster needed an official stamp of seriousness. I stood there, annoyed and a little insulted. Not because she called the police, but because she'd weaponized a tiny plumbing problem into a personal vendetta. The police arrived, 2 officers, polite and professional. They took statements, walked the building with the manager, and even crouched under counters to see the pipes with their own eyes. They listened to Marissa explain how water had dripped from her ceiling and her cabinets were damaged, and how someone upstairs must be responsible. The super looked at the officers and recounted maintenance's findings. The sink trap in Mrs. Gomez's kitchen was clogged with grease and old food. The plumbers had traced the leak and confirmed it originated there. The officers asked Marissa if she still believed the water came from upstairs. Marissa hesitated, which in police speak is an admission or at least an inconvenience. I don't know, she said, voice wavering. I just know my kitchen flooded. One officer then politely asked her if she had noticed any signs of wastewater backing up in her own sink recently. That's a question none of us like because it implies grossness. Hair, soap scum, leftovers. Marissa's perfect hair seemed to twitch. Hi. No, of course not, she said. The officers wrote up the reports and left with the promise that if anyone wanted to press charges for property damage, they could contact the station. Mrs. Gomez accepted the manager's offer to call a cleaner and a plumber. People went back to their apartments, the hallway noise fading back to the usual hum of life. But the story didn't end there. Marissa's accusation had lit a fuse. She began acting as if she had been personally wronged by the building itself, and she needed restitution. For the next week, she posted messages on the building's resident chat, long, indignant rants about unsafe building conditions and neighbors who don't respect others' property. She sent emails to the landlord, to the property management company, and even to the owner of the building. Every message had that same subtle accusation, insinuations that someone upstairs was irresponsible. At first it was irritating. Then it started to affect other neighbors. People began to ask questions about who had complained, who had water stains, who had been noisy. A few old grudges nudged themselves into daylight. A neighbor who'd had a party 6 months ago got a passive-aggressive message from someone who remembered. I tried to stay out of it. I didn't want to be the guy who escalated everything. A week after the flood incident, Marissa came to my door early in the morning and slapped a notice under my apartment door. A printed letter that claimed I had been negligent, that my activities threatened others, and that she had evidence. She threatened small claims, court. She threatened to leak the story to the landlord with me as the villain. That was the tipping point. I'm not proud of my reaction, but I'm also only human. I installed a small dash cam style camera just outside my door. A discreet little thing that faces the corridor and, importantly, the grate to the ceiling that sometimes drips when it rains hard. I wanted a record of comings and goings in case she escalated further. 2 nights later, at 2 a.m., the camera caught something odd. Marissa had a guest, a maintenance-looking guy, but not from the building team, and he carried a small bucket and a toolbox. They whispered by her door, looked around like people checking whether they're being watched, and then the guy used a small implement to unscrew the access panel in the ceiling above the corridor, exactly where the leak could trickle down and appear to come from above other apartments. I rewound the footage, heart thudding. The guy slipped something into the ceiling cavity, a small wet rag maybe, and left. 15 minutes later, Marissa opened her ceiling hatch and threw water down, then acted shocked. On camera, you could almost see the rehearsal, the way she wiped her cheeks afterward, the way she checked the corridor to see who had noticed. It sounds like a bad movie, I know, but I had the footage. I showed it to the manager first. He paled and then arranged to bring it up at the next building committee meeting. We all watched the footage in a small conference room. Neighbors squeezed in like witnesses in a jury box. There were gasps and then, after the initial shock, a collective feeling of betrayal. I expected denial. Instead, Marissa attempted to explain. Initially, she said the footage was staged, that it was someone else, that maybe the timestamps were wrong. Then her tone had shifted from indignation to desperation. The building owner demanded we stop the accusations and settle it with official steps, an independent plumber's inspection and review of the footage. The inspection confirmed what we'd seen. There were no signs of a systemic leak from my apartment. The plumber pointed to a small tampered ceiling hatch and a displaced rag obstructing the drainage path that had been put in place intentionally, then removed before the plumber arrived. The conclusion was blunt. Someone had created a false indicator of a leak. Nobody wants to believe their neighbor would sabotage things to make someone else look bad. But the evidence was clear. Now, you might ask, why would someone do this? Revenge, attention, or maybe a warped desire to set someone up for a fall. Marissa had a reputation for escalating things, but for something like this, she must have planned. When confronted with the footage, she finally confessed, not in a public, tearful way, but in a clipped message to the manager. She said she felt slighted when the building had ignored one of her earlier complaints and decided to force the issue. She didn't intend to get anyone else implicated, she said. She just wanted a proof of that the building had problems. The building committee didn't buy that. They fined her for vandalism and for intentionally creating a hazardous situation. The police reopened their initial report, and when they reviewed the new evidence, they asked Marissa to come down to the station. She was warned and given a formal notice. For several weeks, she faced the humiliation of having neighbors whisper and avoid eye contact, and she was stripped of the nice little advantages she'd enjoyed. The elevator key everyone shared, the privilege of hosting building events, the informal trust of being a responsible tenant. Mrs. N. Gomez got a formal apology and compensation for the water-damaged cabinets. I got a note from the manager thanking me for bringing the footage forward and for being patient. While things were resolved, the building owner promised better maintenance checks and more transparent communication. So a single resident couldn't weaponize the community's anxieties again. What surprised me most wasn't the spectacle of being falsely accused, though that was wild enough, but how quickly a single person could escalate tiny issues into something destructive. It was also a lesson in evidence. In a world where people believe whatever's loudest, sometimes quiet documentation is the only way to protect yourself. By the end of it, I felt oddly exhausted, like I'd been through a small war. Marissa moved out 3 months later. I don't know whether she was forced or whether she chose to leave because the polite community had turned cold. People said she got another job in a different city and a fresh start. I hope she learned something. Maybe not about plumbing, but about community. As for me, I keep my camera, but I stopped feeling like I needed to monitor everything. I learned to speak up earlier, politely, firmly, and to involve management when something seems off. You don't have to fight every battle, but you should protect yourself when someone is trying to set you up. And the building? We're quieter now. People talk in the laundry room about normal things again. The price of coffee, whether the cat needs a sweater. The drama made us more attentive to one another in a weird way. We double-checked each other's sad little leaks instead of assuming the worst. So that's the story. Accused of flooding a neighbor's apartment, only to find out she'd staged it to make someone else look bad. I don't think I ever wanted to win a small neighborly battle so badly, but when you're wrongly blamed, it forces you to act. And sometimes the truth is just a camera and a good plumber away. The end.